Hello, the Sanctum SuperCoach fans. We're back heading to round 20 already. Can't believe it. Full board of the four of us here. Huge scores from the weekend to all share. And we'll also have a little look at the three other sides this week and already look at the 2024 because that's where most of our sides are at. Mike, how'd your side go this week?
Yeah, I lived above my batting above my average. I think 2500. So I was quite pleased. Still hundreds off the top echelon, but given my side is had a pretty poor season, I was quite happy with that. Three league wins out of three, so that's been rare for me. So quite
Nice
happy.
one. Yeah, nice one. Dan, what about you? How'd your side travel this week? As good as Carlton?
Not too bad. Yeah, no, not as good as the Blues. 2-5-4-5. It was all right. It was good. A couple of players that pulled through big scores, and then Laird obviously was sitting on the bench watching it all happen. So, yeah, not too bad.
Great
Mick,
streak.
Mick, I reckon your side had a fair weekend, if I remember correctly. How'd you go?
It was pretty good. It was pretty good. 26-63, by far my best score of the year. Off the back of a 171 from Sicily after his 50 odd last week. Had Timmy English as captain with a 132. So yeah, so 26-63. Very happy with that. Four league wins and put me in good stead for a lead up to the finals at this stage.
Nicely done. Talking finals, not like the rest of us.
Won't be
We'll
the only one.
get struck into our good old Garys and Nathans. We're probably going to have more Garys given all the high scores than Nathans this week. I'll start with you, Mike. Who you got for us?
Yeah, take your pick as a Gary. I don't really know that I do have one. Actually, I will mention because we're going to see him in a bit of a poorer light a bit later on when we talk about the Saints. Jack Steele, 160 points. He's the inverse of every other St Kilda player at the moment, and actually improving rather than going downhill. He was exceptional yesterday, 160 as I said. But my Nathan for the round is a guy who I'm in actually for the only time I'm in Kane Corns' corner because I reckon this guy is not that good at football, and that is Timmy Taranto. On the weekend, Scotty rightfully pointed out at quarter time he was on negative 10 points,
Flying.
23 possessions, three goals, including the match winner from outside of 50 late in the last term. Three free kicks against and running at a whopping 47% kicking efficiency. So I tell you, when he stops getting the ball, he's going to be playing the Magoos, all right? Because he's only because he's getting the ball a lot and kicking some goals is he any good? But my goodness, it's horrible to watch. I don't think he kicks an actual drop punt whenever he puts it on the boot.
He has been very good for my Supercoach side and everyone's this year because he is much better at Richmond than at the Giants, clearly. Dan, what about you, buddy? Who you got? Gary's and Nathan's for this week.
All right. So I think any true blue Carlton supporter had to have a Carlton man as their Gary for this week. We were playing the Witches hat, so that's a bit unfair for them. The under 14 boys side from WA. And look, I went for my Gary, a guy that only played about a third of a match. This guy here, Sam Walsh, scored 109 points, only 14 touches. Didn't need any more than that. Quality over quantity. But every single one of them hit the target. He was involved in 7 scoring opportunities, probably all of them Kerno goals because he kicked 10. Sorry to rub it in, Mike. But he's also going to be my Nathan because I've only got 4 trades left, and he's going to now have to be one of them because he's pinged his hamstring. So he's my Gary Nathan rolled into one. Amazing score, but you don't want to get injuries happening at this stage in the year.
I reckon if you moved your head up a little bit, you'd look like you have your head on his buff shoulders. So, hey, look at that.
Wait, his buff shoulders? I reckon I've.
That's true. Actually, you probably got him. You've got him beat for sure.
Walshy.
I think I lost a couple of leagues by about 20 points, and given he's missed 3/4 of the game, painful. Mick, what about you, buddy? You mustn't have had any Nathan, surely, with that score.
No, I only had a couple of players under 100, so I did do fairly well. But But I'd probably have to give it to Lloydie, who's been super consistent in past years. But he's only and coincidentally since I brought him in, he's only given us 200s out of the last 9 games. So he's a I wouldn't say a rough patch. He's still averaging sort of 85, 90, so it's decent. It's probably not in the top 6 defenders though anymore. And I don't have Tom Stewart in my team, so Lloyd is just occupying that spot that should be held by a better player. But that's the way it goes. And I'm going to have to give the Gary to this lad here, Leaky Parker. He had a sensational score actually on 155 on the weekend, and he's repaid my faith in him when I brought him in a few weeks ago. He's scored fairly consistently. I mean, he's 103.2 for the season, but since I brought him in, he's averaging about 115. So he's repaid me with some really good scores lately, and he'd be my Gary for this week for sure.
And his picture has made it look like your head has wings. So, you've just moved. With glorious. Well, my team only scored 24.90, so we don't need to talk about my piece of junk, as always. I agree with my Gary. Jack Steele, I just brought him in because I wanted someone cheap, and he dominated, which was great. My Nathan is these guys. Is that backwards? I hope so. That says champion data. That's how backwards their scoring system is. Seriously, I was watching Thursday night with my vice captain, Libba. You did absolutely dominated. Contestant possessions galore, hitting targets. He only had 126. It felt like a 160-plus game. So him only getting 126 was pretty disappointing. And then you watch Jack Steele, who got about 80, 100 points in the last quarter for doing the same stuff. I don't get it. They're just confusing. They just do what they want. We just got to make sure we target their favourites in future years. But champion data, what?
They just look at whose name's there. Look at whose name's there, and they give them points. They go, "Oh, Dusty Martin. Oh, here's some points. Oh, Bod, here's some points."
Even the dog, even someone's dog agrees with me that champion data are dodgy.
Yeah, my dogs hate champion data.
Dear. Backwards scoring, but we still love SuperCoach, so we shouldn't bag him too much. Happy to have you on board, champion data. If any of you want to be on a podcast, please sing out. All good. All right, so last week we looked at can't even remember, the Hawks, Freo, and the Bulldogs, and looked at those we thought were their SuperCoach MVPs for the year. Ones are on the rise to look at for next year, maybe. Those that have fallen short of our expectations, and then the potentials for 2024 locks or otherwise. This week we have the Suns, the Saints, and the mighty top of the table Pies. I will start with you, Mike. I don't know which side you are looking at, but go nuts.
I am looking at the Saints this week. So let's just start with the MVP. I think a lot of people had him alongside either Gawn or English as their second ruck, and that is Rowan Marshall, third-ranked ruck in the comp, averaging 108. He's had plenty of high scores, 7 above 120, but he's also had a few low scores. For those of you who have had him all of year, he's been a bit of a yo-yo. And whilst he is averaging nearly 110, there's been some weeks in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So he's probably the MVP, which probably says a lot. The St Kilda have really fallen away the second half of the year. Biggest surprise, I've got a couple. The Mosquito, Mitch Owens in his as a potential rising star, averaging 83.9, had plenty of high scores. He really epitomises the fall away of St Kilda, yet they're still winning. Thank God for their draw over the last few weeks. His 5-round average is 76.2. And if you're still averaging 83.9, it says a lot for the first half and second half of the year. An honourable mention to Mason Wood. So I 3 or 4% ownership, but he was flying in the first half of the year. He's still averaging 91.7, but if you compare this to 71.5 last year and 70.7 in the year before, perhaps one worth having a look at as a mid-ranger, who knows, in next year. Plenty of other options, most likely. biggest letdown. We've spoken about him a couple of times, and that is the captain, Jack Steele. The poor guy's been riddled with injury, but coming off 110 average last year and 126 in 2021, he's only averaging 97.8 this year, 5 scores below 100, and some really low scores in those. But last 3 weeks, and thankfully since I brought him in, 140, 105, 160. So for those beloved supporters of the Inner Sanctum SuperCoach podcast who were listening 3 or 4 weeks ago when we were discussing Millsy and Steelo and who to bring in, for those of you who I went with both, and they both performed really, really well on the weekend. Looking ahead to 2024, a couple of names. One is Rowan Marshall a lock? I'm probably going to say no to that. Due to his fluctuations in scores. His third-ranked Witsy, I think, is the second-ranked, but I'm really going to be... It's English, and it's Gawn if Grundy's not there, and or potentially it's Grundy if he's gone to Port or another club. So mine will be purely based on how those two are shaped up, Gawn and Grundy, with English. The other one, which I think is a lock as a D4, 5, or 6 is Jack Sinclair. I had him last year, and he's shown that he's been consistent year on year. So I think well worth slotting him in. He constantly gets a lot of the ball running off half back. What's he averaging? He's had 4 low-ish scores, but still averages 105. One of those guys who can get 130, 140. Every so often. So that's the Saints for me. They're still sitting 5th or 6th on the ladder. How that is so, I do not know. But I'd love nothing else for the Saints to keep the Blues or the Bombers out of the top 8. I can't see it happening. But they've still been admirable, given that many said they would finish last and their list was horrible. So well done to the Saints.
Good job, Mike. Nice comprehensive review. Dan, Mike, Mick, anything else to add on the Saints before we move on?
Just on Rowan Marshall. Yeah, he was averaging third most for any ruck, but he's about 200 plus clear in terms of total points scored. So those few games that Jared Witts missed when he was a little bit tired, they just, I don't know, it's just one of those things to look at in terms of total points scored. As a bit of an indicator as well. I agree. So looking at Gawn and Grundy, see where they're at.
Mick, mate, anything else Saints-wise?
No, I think Mike's pretty much nailed everything on the head right there. I couldn't agree more. And what Dan said about Marshall is bang on. It's going to be an interesting ruck choices coming up for next season, that's for sure.
Yeah, they've only got 6 players averaging over 90 and just 2 over 100. Sort of sums up where they're at, I think, a little bit. So certainly a couple to watch there, but maybe a lock with Rowan Marshall. We'll pick this up as a podcast in March next year and decide on our rucks for our glorious team we're going to make. Next up, we will talk about the Gold Coast Suns. Is that you, Mick?
That's me. I've had a bit of a look at the Suns. The MVP for this year would have to be Jared Witts with an average of 109.8. He's been super consistent as their leading ruckman. We've had some obviously a bit of turmoil at the club with the sacking of Stewie Jew and the unknown quantity about who's going to be taking over. So it's been an up and down season for them, obviously off the field. And I think their results have been terrible on field. I think they probably should be knocking on the door of finals by now. Compare them to GWS, obviously, who entered the competition the same year. GWS have already been to granny and a prelim, and the Suns have just failed miserably and failed to get, I think, the Gold Coast community on board as well, which is why their numbers are so dismal. Whether that's got to do with a lot with retention of players and whatnot, I don't want to go into too much detail, but it's interesting to see if they get the likes of Dimmer in next year, if he can sort of turn things around. I think they've got a really talented list. Looking at some of the first year players they've had, like Matt Rao looked like he's going to be a generational player until he until he got injured in that first season. Noah Anderson's been really good this year, really consistent. And I think one of the surprise packet for the year would have to be Sam Flanders. He's gone up by 210k this year, and he's averaging 81 and 111 in his last 3 rounds. 110.6 in his last 5. So 5 scores. His last 5 scores have been, the lowest has been 96, and he's had a 125 in there. So he's starting to prove why he was a first round draft pick back in, I think, 2021. So yeah, that's he's interesting to see if he's becomes. I don't know if he's going to be a lock next year. Speaking of locks, there's the likes of Anderson, maybe Rao. Those guys are going to be in that 570, 580 range where they'll give you 102 to 105 per week. But it's the two. I think there's going to be other midfield choices out there to start your season. They're going to be a bit better than those guys. And the biggest letdown would have to be Took. I know he's Turkey Miller. He had that round where he only scored the 40 in round 6, I think it was, when he got injured. So it's obviously dented his average somewhat. But he's lost about 150 over 150k this year, and he's had a score of, other than the 40, but he's only turned up once since he's come back, and he's had an 81 in there and 92, and that's just not the Took that we knew from last year, who was scoring 120 plus and started the season at about 660k this year. So he would have been a top 3 midfielder to start the season. So whether he now that he's come back from injury, gets a good preseason under his belt, he might be one worth considering and as a lock for next year as well, and just check out his preseason and see what he puts out there.
Yeah, I reckon that Took Miller will be very, very popular in March next year, given his price has dropped and what he's capable of. One other I thought maybe was Ben King is going to end up about $200,000. He's hasn't gone anywhere. He's gone backwards with his scores. But give him a pre-season and get him fully fit. Coming back off a knee, it's always hard to do well. If they can reshape how they look and deliver the ball a bit better to him, he's not going to get to 600,000, but he could make it 200,000 easily enough if he can pull together some decent games. Mike, Dan, anything else on the mighty Gold Coast Suns? Turn your mic on, mate. First time we've had a mute all year. Well done.
Yeah, jeez, I was sneezing away before. Look, the only thing I can say about the Gold Coast is the horror that's been the ones that I brought in this year. Charlie Constable, I think he's still sitting on my bench.
Yep.
The other guy whose surname starts with a U, don't even know how to pronounce that one. And at our failed experiment on Rory Atkins. So I don't think, other than Tuco and maybe Witsy, I won't be going near any Gold Coast Suns player heading into next year.
Dear Dan.
He scored another 100 on the weekend, Rory Atkins. I mean, I turfed him a while ago, but he's popping up every now and then. I think, like, for me, I was looking at the start of the year, someone I was really, really keen on bringing in Anderson. I thought that he was going to lift. And he's scored some big scores, but he goes missing from time to time. So, it's that thing of what's next year. Next year's going to be his, fourth year or something?
Maybe 4th or 5th, yeah.
So, he could be about that time of then making that gap, bridging that gap, between being a 100 averaging player and a 110 averaging player. I think he's got the skills. He hits the scoreboard. He's pretty good by foot. He could do it. He could do it next year. Who knows?
Who knows? All depends on the coach. They've only got 5 blokes averaging over 90 as well. And then it's a big drop off, the 6 blokes, 83. So they need to get more of the ball and scoring, hitting targets and getting us more points. That's for sure. A few of the Suns to look at, keep an eye on for next year, let's just say, without any locks for the side. That leaves us with the side that is flying at the moment. Although if we watch this back in about October, hopefully we can say they didn't win the flag. And that's Collingwood. Dan, over to you and the Mighty Pies.
Well, I definitely drew the short straw here. No one wants to be talking about the Collingwood Football Club. Given how good they're doing, it's making us all sick. MVP, come on, you can't go past this guy. Nick Dacos, averaging 122.4, 12 scores above 120. lower scores of 72, 81, 99. He's had an absolutely phenomenal year. No one's come within about 40 meters of him. So, yeah, footy's pretty straightforward when you're getting a lot of space. When he does get a bit of attention, his score has dropped down, and we've seen that. We've seen that against Brisbane. He got a bit of attention. Against Port, he got a bit of attention with Willem Drew. Willem Drew laid something like 16 tackles. I reckon about 15 of them were on Nick Dacos. But, yeah, he just keeps on keeping on. And had an absolutely phenomenal year. Biggest surprise, I think he'd probably be up there with this surprise. Nick Dacos, as I don't know that I thought that he was going to score this well. I especially didn't think that people were just going to keep ignoring him and letting him go about his business. I just don't get why that's continuing to happen. And the teams have shown that if you do put the clamps on him, he does drop back a bit. The other big surprise is that Jordan De Goey hasn't had any news headlines about him being an absolute idiot in the last 12 months. I think that has to be a surprise to everyone as well. In terms of biggest letdown, it's an interesting one. So Nick Dacos, 122.4 average. De Goey, 100.1 average. The only two Collingwood players averaging above 100. So this is a team that's on top of the table, like 2 games clear. We know that typically teams that are winning games end up with a greater share of the SuperCoach points, but it's just even. It's so evenly distributed across their team. Different players pop up from time to time. But this guy is a former Brownlow medalist. Tom Mitchell has slipped 63,000. He was like potentially underpriced going into the season. Potentially. Obviously, he has not lived up to any of that previous sort of hype around getting the ball. He plays a different role in that Collingwood midfield. It's all about clearance. It's not about accumulation. And so the fantasy pig of old is dead, really. 30 points on the weekend. I think he was the sub a couple of weeks ago, which was really interesting. And I think he gets subbed out. I think he may have got subbed out in the game against Port. 2024 lock. I've got to go with Nick Dacos. He's the first in the back line. If he is in the back line, I'm assuming he's probably played. This is the tricky bit, I suppose, going back to what we were saying about Jack Sinclair as well. Have these guys now ticked over to that point of no return? Have they done too many midfield minutes? I mean, if Nick Dacos is a midfielder, he's still a lock. He's still averaging a freakish amount, so he still would be up there with the first picks. I can't really sort of imagine anyone else. The only other one that's been sort of mentioned is maybe Josh Dacos, who is arguably the All-Australian wingman, or at least one of the All-Australian wingmen. If the All-Australian team picked wingman and not just put midfielders in the forward pocket, half forward flank and wing, he could be in there, but I can't imagine they're going to actually appoint a winger in the wing position for All-Australian.
Yeah, I might chuck in as well. Darcy Cameron, a lot of people went with as their second ruck, and he broke down pretty quick. And even since he's been back, I don't think he's been scoring nearly as much as we thought he might, as pretty much the sole ruck. I know they've got Big Mason there as well, but he's going to end up only about 450,000 by the time next season starts. Is that enough? Might be one to watch at the start of next year. We're going to end up with about 35 to watch and 20 locks, but that's okay. Mike, Mick, any other pies we should keep an eye on?
Yeah, I think for next year, as Dan has said, De Goey obviously has learned how to even spell football this year, and he's turned his life around a little bit. But coincidentally, he was absolutely flying until he went and absolutely cheap-shotted Elijah Hewitt, copped a 3-week ban, went to Bali, and has come back in pretty poor form. So you read into that what you will. But since he has returned, averaging about only 88 or 89. So maybe there's something afoot there and a story brewing. Oh, goodness gracious. They need to straight sets. We want it, don't we?
Well, this podcast wants it, that's for sure.
Maybe we're going about it the wrong way. There's an absolute ton of Collingwood supporters out there. Maybe we should try and appeal to them to get our numbers up. We love the pies. They're great.
From now on, this is the Collingwood Supercoach podcast. Or Collingwood. We are nothing but love for Collingwood. Please, Collingwood supporters, stick with us. We love you.
Craig McRae is the saviour. We all know it.
I guess anyone can coach better than Bucks. Isn't that right? All right, Mick, anything else?
Yeah, looking at Darcy Moore's form for the year, he is, and you watch Collingwood games, he's just an absolute superstar. This guy, he really is. He's defensive marking, his contested marking is, I reckon, second to none in the league. I have to say it's maybe on par with maybe one or two other players, but he's just so strong in those contested marks. And he's given us 9 tons this year, and not just that, but he's been super consistent. Hasn't missed a single game. He's actually gone up about 80 Ks, averaging 95, and I think he'll only improve in years to come. So possibly look at him for a starting in your team next year, but. He'll be priced reasonably well. He's 536 at the moment, so if he continues in this current vein of form, like they always nudge the prices up a little bit at the start of the next season. So he might be able to pick him up for about 550, and then if he can average 105, 110 next year, then I think it'd be pretty solid pick.
Look for him to attack about 15 contested marks as Carlton just deliver it straight down his throat for inside 50 after inside 50. On the weekend, we don't seem to understand that if we kick it away from Darcy Moore, we've got a shot, and if we kick it to Darcy Moore, then he just rebounds. So
took Geelong 3 quarters to realise don't kick it near Harris Andrews either, and when we worked that out, we were fine. It's funny, footy's funny. I watched that Isaac Quainer bloke as well. This is the Collingwood podcast, I know now. I'm surprised he hasn't scored more points. He is a gun these days, and they can probably say that about a lot of pies. So I could even see them next year having more players averaging higher than they are this year, that's for sure. But we'll talk more Collingwood next week just for all our Collingwood fans out there. We love Collingwood. That's it. Everyone get on board. That's it for our looks at next year and looking at the MVPs, etc. for this year. We'll have 3 more sides for you next week, so watch out for that. A couple of things to quickly finish, Dan. Rage traders, I'm guessing. I don't like to look on a running sheet. I always want to guess. I reckon the bloke behind you is going to be pretty angry about. Well, you're not angry, but he's enough to be rage traded.
Yeah, look, it's enough. It's enough. You get injured in the last 4 weeks, you're gone. The saddest bit and the most annoying bit about it is you lost so much value. You're about 500, high 500s when I brought you in, and I don't know what you're languishing at the moment, but very little currency. Sam Walsh. Look, I'm pretty astonished to see his average for the year going into that game was about 30 disposals, which, I don't know, for some reason just feels higher than he's been able to sort of turn out. Maybe he's not been hitting the scoreboard as much. His scores haven't been great since I brought him in, but he played this one game that he played phenomenally, and he pings his ham. Walshy, I love you, mate, but you're gone.
Is he the Tim Taranto of Carlton? Can't hit a target.
He was going 100% on the weekend, so
aside from that,
I'm
talking rest of the season type areas. He has scored not bad, not good. So
yeah, I guess his name's not Bontempelli, so he doesn't really get the points. Champion data.
He does look like Anthony Scott from the Western Bulldogs, though, I reckon. Next week we'll put both those photos up. Trust me. Laurie, so last thing, we'll look at the vice captains. I believe for most leagues we are into the final game and some critical decisions are probably needed. Mike, you got anyone left field or straight field or right field or whichever field you want?
No, all my fields are bare, Scott. They're cooked. I've got no trades left. I'm languishing at the bottom. I'm there to mind you, scoring 2,500 plus when you lose a couple of players late on a Friday and shuffle the decks around a little bit. Look, you've got the blockbuster on Friday night. I reckon with a few injuries, you might be walking away with your tail between your legs and expect Nick Dacos to bounce back. I don't think you're going to send anyone to him. He could score big.
We don't understand that. No,
he's your big vice captain. But also the Bulldogs are playing at Marvel. Sorry, it's at Mars, isn't it? Down in Ballarat.
Different planet.
They're playing relatively early on Saturday, so there's some options there again for English. He's absolutely dominating. So he could be an option. And then, I don't know. You've probably got the Showdown on Saturday night, where hopefully Lairdy's back, and Dawson always lifts in the showdowns, doesn't he? So plenty of options. Look, it depends on your trades in left field, but you only have to look at the guy who won, or girl. Women can play SuperCoach too, of course. That scored 29-13 using a trade to bring in Charlie Curnow. And looking at something like that, maybe a Nick Larkey as captain on a Sunday afternoon against the Witches Hats might be the way to go.
I don't reckon Nick Larkey, but I reckon LDU. If you haven't got him, that's who my Walsh is. My Walsh is going to LDU. He was awesome on Sunday, and you're right, playing the Witches Hats. He might be the captain. Why not? Who cares? Dan, captain, vice captain, anything else?
I kind of like that call. Just pick a North player. They're playing the Witches Hats.
Diesel.
North. Honestly, if you looked at the way that North were playing against the Saints on the weekend, they were robbed. They should have come home with the Chockies in that game. There's a few interesting ones. I think Brisbane playing Gold Coast. You've got Neil Dunkley has been an absolute freak. He's been averaging 121, which is great. It was 115 on the weekend, so I'd expect him to sort of bounce back. And then I don't know. It's the position of, if you're absolutely done and dusted, you want a left field option. As we were saying, maybe go for a goal scorer that you think might tear a team apart, or a midfielder that won't be tagged whatsoever. I think it'll be interesting to see what Port do against Adelaide on the weekend. Isaac Rankin obviously missing. There's some interesting games coming up this weekend.
Well, yeah, I don't know the exact stats, but I should imagine Tom Stewart's average in Geelong would be pretty good compared to other venues even. And Freo ravaged with injury. I see that Sean Darcy and Fife are done for the year. I'd expect him to take a heap of even-set marks. So if I had him, which I did, but then I got rid of him when he missed one whole week with a knee, whatever it was. I'll back a 145 plus from Tom Stewart this week. There's my vice captain choice if I had him. Mick, anything else?
Yeah, I think get on early with your VC this week. If you're anything like me, the players you can loophole into. I've got the likes of Constable, I've got Sharp, I've got Gilby, I've got McDowell White, I've got Madden. So there's 5 guys there that are all playing in the first 4 games
I've got Madden.
of the week. Still got Madden sitting there. He's been there all season.
Ditto.
So 5 guys that I'm using for my loophole, they're all playing in the first 4 games of the week. So important to get your VC in nice and early. So for me, it will be, I don't have Tommy Stewart either. If I did, I'd 100% be putting it on him. But it'll be Nick Dacos for me to getting the VC tag. And then into, the likes of the usuals, the Bonts, the Livers, maybe Timmy English, even maybe Jack Steele against Hawthorn. He could churn out a decent score after his 160 on the weekend. So lots of choices. And again, depending on who you're playing and what he's doing, just keep an eye on your opponents and make base decisions around your particular circumstances.
Saf Merritt, does he bounce back?
I think he does.
Games.
Yeah, I mean, we've got Sydney this weekend. We've got Sydney. We're back at we played at Marvel on the weekend as well.
Yeah, you're back at Etihad after 6 days.
Back at Etihad after 6 days. But against a midfield that doesn't have Bont and Liberatore, and and we're not up against Timmy English in the ruck. We're up against whoever the hell Sydney have got these days. So we've got. I think Merritt's just he'll get a lot more of the ball this week. I think would he score about 70 something on the weekend? It was pretty poor and one of the scores out of the blue for him. It was pretty average. So
they might cheer him off in his 202nd game though.
Yeah. Well, if he can get us over the line, so good.
All right. So to sum up our vice captain advice, Captain, there's plenty of choice as always. No, I do like Mick. I do like the thinking about who your loophole is, because I didn't think about that. There are a heap of them playing early on that Saturday, which is pretty rare. So good advice there. Good to finish on some hearty advice. That's it for us. Check out Sanctum's website. 4 episodes to go of this quality podcast. We raised our viewership from the week before by 100% this week, from 12 to 24. So we're on the way back up. But now, because we've talked up Collingwood all week, we'll get at least 50, I reckon, for sure.
Go
Thanks,
the Pies.
Go the Pies. We love the Pies. That's it.
Can't do it. Can't do it. See you
Yeah,
later.
not going to happen.
Good work, boys.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next week.